What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hutch Coming in Clutch. I'm your host, Hutchison Brown, and today we've got a fantastic show. I'm talking about some bolder predictions to wrap up the 2025 offseason. That's right, this is the last podcast episode before we get into preparation for the 2025-2026 season, week one. Like next week, we start 2 episodes a week, and we're going full into the fantasy football season, and it's quite a fun time of the year. Why not wrap up the offseason with some really fun and bold predictions? We'll get into more of those in a second. And we're talking more about my schedule later in the podcast episode. Without further ado, please follow me on Twitter at HutchisonB_FF. Make sure you check out the podcast wherever you're listening and subscribe. I'd really appreciate you to subscribe and click the little bells wherever you're listening and review wherever you're listening, rate wherever you're listening, whatever you can do to spread the word about this podcast, spread it around. Please make sure you do so you'll be notified every single time a new episode comes out, and you'll be helping me out spread the word of the show. So without further ado, but now let's get into the podcast. Again, I said I'm talking about some bolder predictions today, but something that I don't like in the fantasy football world with spicy takes is that they say things and do not have rankings that show it. Like there's people that say, "Oh, I think this guy could finish as a top 5 running back in 2025," and they have him as like their RB32, and you ask them, "Would you put $5 on it?" They say no. Like they wouldn't even put $5 on it. Like these are takes that the takes I'm throwing out are takes I would not only put money on, but I have it basically ranked this way. Like I am in on this. Like I would stand by this. These are flag plants for me. Now, we're going to jump in right away, and you're going to see some of these coming because I like some players and like some things in fantasy football this year. The first one, Travion Henderson will be a top 10 running back in fantasy football this season. Travion Henderson, when you look at his abilities as a football player and you combine that with the Patriots offense and what they need out of him and what they're going to do with him, it promotes a beautiful, beautiful season coming for him in fantasy football. Let's start with the physical abilities. He has the explosive playmaking ability like no other. Any run, any screen pass, any reception, any opportunity he gets could be a touchdown from any area of the field. He has the speed and the explosiveness and the ability to make people miss to the point where he can just take any run or any touch to the house. That explosive upside gives you week winning upside on a weekly fantasy football basis. Now let's talk about his PPR upside. This is a player that has elite receiving talent. He's already one of the best pass blockers and one of the best pass catchers at running back in the NFL as a rookie. It's very, very clear. The dude is an elite receiving back. He probably already is a top 10 receiving back in this league right now. You look at those abilities combined, that promotes week winning upside with huge plays and a good baseline because he gets PPR and catches. Like that's huge. He has a huge, huge fantasy football ceiling right now because of those two factors. Now you look at the Patriots offense. It's set up beautifully for him. You have Ramondre Stevenson, who is better than him at nothing besides maybe being like 20 pounds heavier, maybe being slightly more physical. That is it. Ramondre Stevenson is a bruiser, and that is all he is. He is fine. He's another Brian Robinson, another Najee Harris, who are fine in their own right too. But Travion Henderson is just on a different level in every aspect of the game. And he will quickly lead this backfield. I expect by week 4 to 6 him to be the clear lead of this backfield and to have a monstrous workload for fantasy football. And I expect that because when you look at Josh McDaniels, he has given 11 of so he has 16 seasons as the offensive coordinator for the Patriots, and in 11 of those seasons, there has been a running back on the roster that has earned 55 plus targets. And looking at the running backs he's given those targets to, and looking at the talent of Travion Henderson, I would expect that number to be up from 55 and more towards 65, 70, maybe even more. I mean, we saw James White earn 120 targets in a single season on this offense, and this team needs receiving help real bad. So I would not be shocked if we see Travion Henderson earns a monstrous receiving workload for the running back position this year. That is all promoting him to be a serious elite fantasy football asset volume-wise. And obviously, like I mentioned, the explosive playmaking ability, he can take any run to the house. He's probably going to have a couple of really fun touchdowns this year. It's going to make him huge for fantasy football. So I project him to be a top 10 fantasy football back. Now, let's head to the Detroit Lions. Jameson Williams, he's going to lead the Lions team in receiving yardage this season. From week 11 onward last year, the Detroit Lions offense had to pass the football a lot. And we saw Jameson Williams step up in a huge way. He was running every route to perfection. He knew exactly where he needed to be to get the football, and he was really helpful to this offense. He was only 152 yards short of St. Brown from week 11 onward. He was basically pacing with him for targets. Now, when you look at St. Brown, he had one game where he had 193 yards. That was his career high in a game by 30 yards. So a very clear outlier. If you remove this game from the week 11 onward sample, Jamison Williams is pacing with Amon-Ra St. Brown for targets and for receiving yards. And now you look at Jamison Williams as a player, I think he has more physical upside than St. Brown. The speed, the explosiveness, the ability to make plays downfield, the yards after the catch ability, these are all things that Amon-Ra St. Brown does not have nearly to the level Jamison Williams does. And as a result, you develop the mental abilities, the footwork, the technician abilities of Jamison Williams, which all we've heard from Detroit is that he is doing that beautifully and is set for another breakout season. We can see Jameson Williams become a better player outright than Amon-Ra St. Brown. He just has more physical upside and more physical talent than St. Brown does. So if he's able to develop the technician, the footwork, all those things that St. Brown does really, really well, Jameson Williams could just be better than Amon-Ra St. Brown. And now we look at Ben Johnson leaving this offense, he was heavily favorable towards the slot. I'm not saying Amon-Ra St. Brown earned all of his targets because of Ben Johnson. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a great player. Let me make that clear. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a phenomenal player. He's a top 10 wide receiver in this league for sure. Ben Johnson being removed from this offense enables the Lions to be less slot favorable. You look at the coaching staff that are taking over, there's no one in that coaching staff where it's like, yes, they absolutely love the slot. Now, Dan Campbell will keep it the way it is. He will love to target Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown will be great for fantasy this year. I have him ranked top 10. But I had Jameson Williams ranked 15. The only reason I have St. Brown ranked above Jameson Williams for fantasy is because of touchdowns. St. Brown has used a ton of the red zone, and I think he will probably earn a couple more catches this year. But when you look at Jameson Williams as a player, the explosive playmaking ability and the ability to make plays downfield promotes huge yardage gains. And if he's getting similar target shares to Amon-Ra St. Brown, we're going to see him earn more yardage, and that's going to be huge for his fantasy ball value. And I think it's good for this bowl prediction. Jameson Williams will lead the Lions receiving yards team in receiving yards this year. DeAndre Swift, we're going from the Lions offense to a former Detroit Lion. DeAndre Swift will be a top 15 back this year in fantasy football. He's a fun, explosive back that can catch the football. This is great for fantasy football. We love that for fantasy football. And when you look at his production over the years, he has never finished outside the top 24 in overall fantasy football points when you look at PPR scoring or half PPR or non-PPR scoring. It doesn't matter. He is great for fantasy football, been steadily very productive in his career. Doesn't matter the injuries that have hit him. He's been very good. And now he's had 2 seasons where we've seen RB1 upside. One of them being with Ben Johnson. Everyone claims Ben Johnson loves to hate on DeAndre Swift, and that's simply not true. We saw Jamal Williams in 2021 score a ton of touchdowns, but DeAndre Swift, in terms of points per game basis with Ben Johnson in 2021, when DeAndre Swift returned from injury, he was an RB1 in fantasy football. He was top 12 in points per game. It was limited touches, but he was able to do a lot with them, and he was earning a lot in the receiving game. It made him a top 12 back. And we look at what he did with Philadelphia, the elite offense in 2023. In that first half, he was an RB1. And then the Eagles played San Francisco. And from that point on, I don't know if it was traumatizing to them or what happened. As an Eagles fan, it was disgusting to watch. They completely fell apart. And their offense completely fell apart. And that wasn't necessarily Swift's fault because they forgot to run the football, the Eagles did, and Jalen Hurts looked terrible. And the play calling was absolutely disastrous. So I'm not surprised that that's what we saw from DeAndre Swift in fantasy. He started to fall off a little bit. But he was an RB1 in that first half. He was elite with the Eagles. And now we have Ben Johnson and potentially an elite offense in the same team in Chicago. And DeAndre Swift is set up for a full-time workhorse role in Chicago's offense because you look at the backups, they're all hurt. I mean, Gamanungai, Roschon Johnson, they're hurt. Like everyone's dealing with injury right now in Chicago. So DeAndre Swift's just set up for the clear-cut workhorse role, and there's no doubt in my mind that he will be a top 20 back this year in fantasy football. But I personally am ranked top 15. I'm excited for him this year. Now, let's talk about Jahmyr Gibbs. He's going to average 25 plus points per game this season, RB1 overall. When you look at the Lions beat reporters, when you look at the Lions training camp, when you look at the preseason reports, when you look at everything that's being shown to us right now in camp, it is very, very clear. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to earn significantly more touches this season. When you look at the practices, when you look at the scrimmages, when you look at the way they're playing, Jahmyr Gibbs is getting on the field more and more, and beat writers are noticing it. The coaching staff is noticing it. They're getting him on the field more, and especially around the goal line, they're creating some really creative packages for him. If this becomes a backfield where we're looking at a 60 to 65% share from Gibbs and more like 40% or 35, 40% from Monty, I mean, RB1 overall upside by multiple points per game is very realistic for him. Jahmyr Gibbs is a ridiculous playmaker, arguably the best running back in football right now, who can do unbelievable things when he has the ball in his hand. We literally saw last year when Montgomery was gone, this dude was earning significant touches. What was he doing with them? Week 15 through 18, Monty got knocked out midweek, mid-game, week 15, and then week 17, 16, 17, 18, Gibbs played. Here were his PPR points per game logs. 28.4, 25.4, 26.3, and 48 against Minnesota. Elite defense. 48 points. If Monty is moved out of the way a little bit this year, Gibbs is going to be an absolute monster in fantasy football this year. And I would argue that he might approach one of the best fantasy football running back seasons that we have ever seen. It's right there for him. Now, next hot take. Jackson Smith-Njigba will be a top 3 receiver in the NFL in targets. Now, I don't do projections when it comes to statistics, so I can't actually say I have it ranked this way. I do have JSN ranked as my wide receiver 9, because if I were to project this, I would look at this offense and say, man, I don't think Sam Darnold's going to throw a ton of touchdowns this year in this offense. And I think this offense isn't going to be elite. This offensive line's not great. I don't think Sam Darnold's going to be an elite quarterback. So touchdowns are going to be limited for JSN. I would project like 1,200 yards probably, but only like a handful of touchdowns. I think his touchdown production is going to be limited. And we look at Sam Darnold as a quarterback, again, like I said, I don't really fully believe in him. I think some of these targets might not be great. So while he's going to have less catches and less yards than he should if he had an elite quarterback, I still think the targets are going to be there in a huge way. You have potentially washed Cooper Kupp and then nobody else in this receiving room. JSN is the clear-cut number 1, and he's only getting better and better. We saw it throughout the season in his second year. He only got better and better. He was monstrous in the back half of the year, basically sidelined DK Metcalf as the wide receiver 1 of this offense, and then they traded DK Metcalf away. Like, JSN is a monstrous talent. He's a great player, and with Cooper Kupp now taking some slot snaps, it gives Jackson Smith-Njigba the opportunity to work on the outside as well, which he can do very, very well. We saw that in college, and we've seen it a little bit in the NFL as well. So I'm in on JSN as a top 10 wide receiver this year, and I think he'll be a top 3 in the NFL in targets. Now, last hot take. This is one that's more about an NFL team than an actual player, but I want to throw one of these in. Carolina Panthers, they're going to be a winning playoff team this year, and they're going to win their division. Simple as that, man. You look at Baker Mayfield and this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, they lost Liam Cohen, a huge piece for their offense at the coaching staff. And then you look at Baker Mayfield, he's probably going to have some significant touchdown regression this year. He has 7.2% touchdown rate last year. That is multiple percentage points above his career average in Tampa Bay. So I expect that to severely go down. That's going to ruin him a little bit, and that's going to limit this offense's touchdown production. You had Bucky Irving, who had a weirdly efficient year last year. Obviously, I think he's a very good player, but the amount of efficiency metrics he was leading the NFL in, or almost leading the NFL in, it's kind of unreasonable for him to reproduce that. Like, he's probably going to dip a tad this year. And then when you look at the receiving room, they're all hurt. I mean, Chris Godwin, Jalen Millen, Cade Otton are all hurt. Mike Evans is a 32-year-old wide receiver that still has injuries lagging on him, soft tissue injuries. That is a really, really scary sign. Not a fan of that. You have Emeka Egbuka, and he's probably going to be great. But the rest of this receiving room is looking pretty concerning. And this defense also doesn't look elite. So they're a team that I think might miss 9 wins this year. Like, they're going to be fighting for 9 wins this year, in my opinion. And then Saints are terrible. We know that. And then when you look at the Falcons, obviously Michael Banks Jr. could have a massive breakout this year and could catapult this team into the 10 to 12 win conversation. But he would have to have a massive breakout, and that's just not something you saw in those 3 games he played. He looked okay. I think he'll be solid this year, but I don't project him to be an elite quarterback this year. And as a result, when you have a mediocre defense like Atlanta does, and when you have losses of offensive line like Atlanta did this past year, and when you have, Drake London, but Darnell Mooney's hurt, Kyle Pitts is questionable, it's hard to project this team to be, a 10-plus win team. I think Carolina could get that this year, and it's all in the back of Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young is going to be a phenomenal player this year. I really, really do. When you saw what happened in the back half of the season, he was making some throws that only like 2 or 3 quarterbacks in this league can make. On the run, in the back of his own end zone, like being pressured, it didn't matter. He was able to make some elite throws. I mean, he basically won the Kansas City game and won the game against Philly, both teams in the Super Bowl. His defense let him down in Kansas City, and he got drop problems in against Philly. I mean, I watched that game with my own eyes very, very closely. I mean, I watched the Kansas City one too, but I was very, very intently watching the Philly game as an Eagles fan. And I mean, they like Bryce Young won the game. Xavier Legette had it in the end zone and dropped it. Like that was the game. Bryce Young won that game. Xavier Legette lost it. Now, looking at Bryce Young, what he's set up to do this year, you have Dave Canales in year 2 as the head coach, which is really fun, really good to develop that continuity in that offense. You have Tedera McMillan, the first round pick, set to make an awesome stance as the wide receiver 1 for this team this year. Jalen Coker, Jatavian Sanders, and Xavier Legette, all rookies that flashed good things last year, heading into year 2. All of them could have nice breakouts. Then you have Chuba Hubbard, a very solid running back, backed up by Rico Dowdle, another solid running back. The offensive line, the defense have been built up over the last couple of years. I think this team is set to win 9 games this year, and I think they could definitely be not necessarily a playoff contender, but I wouldn't be surprised if they won a playoff game. I think Bryce Young could absolutely get there this year. So I'm looking at them to win the division. Carolina Panthers, let's go. And now, lastly, to wrap up my predictions part of this show, let's talk about the Super Bowl. Super Bowl is always a fun one. Buffalo is going to beat Minnesota in the Super Bowl. That is my official prediction. Buffalo, looking at their team, Josh Allen, that elite defense. The receiving core is looking better this year with an addition of Josh Palmer, Keon Coleman in year 2, Khalil Shakir continuing to step up. Then you have James Cook out of the backfield, along with Ray Davis in the backfield, a great offensive line, and of course Josh Allen at the helm of it all. I think he's got it I think he's got it in him to win a Super Bowl. I just think a couple things have been holding him back the last couple of years in that team. The defense has choked in moments they needed him. Josh Allen has also made a couple mistakes, but man, I think he's ready. I think this is the year they get to the Super Bowl and win it. But then I have Minnesota going, and I think Minnesota, this is the spicier take of the two. It all depends on JJ McCarthy. Their defense is absolutely loaded at every area. Their offense, absolutely loaded at every area. Kevin O'Connell, one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in the NFL right now. He is an elite head coach. He's up there with the best. Jaden McCarthy is the only unknown in this offense. He is the only thing that is unknown on this team. If he is good, if Kevin O'Connell is able to make him good, work with him, this team will be so good this year. Like another 14-win season could be there for Minnesota this year. I think he's good, man. I think he's good. When you watch what he did in college, he put up some great numbers, did some great things. And then when you look at what he was doing last year for this offense, the coach staff, as well as beat reporter, says he was in the building every day, working with the team, helping with game prep, learning this offense, and now he steps into year 2. He is set for a huge season. I cannot wait to see what he does this year. I think Minnesota is going to be big time this year. Now, that's going to be all for the predictions part of this show for Hutch Coming in Clutch in general, but we're going to wrap up the show by telling you my schedule for the upcoming fantasy football season. So remember, Tuesdays and Thursdays are going to be the episode days. So recording Mondays and Wednesdays, or maybe sometimes Tuesday, Thursday mornings, depending on what happens in the schedule. I have a lot of things going on during football season. So Tuesday's episode is going to be more simple. It's 2 main segments. One of them is going to be the waiver wire. Talk about some huge pieces that you need to add on the waiver wire, trying to dig deep, get some guys that you really need to get on your roster. And then the other part, in the fantasy football world, a lot of people have a lot of reactions to a lot of things every week. People are panicking across Twitter all the time, every single week about, oh my gosh, this player scored 30 points. Oh my gosh, this player had a huge play. Oh my goodness, this player's hurt now. This player's doing well. What is this quarterback doing? Like, what's happening? Right? There's so many reactions. And that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about. I want to talk about the stuff that people are really talking about, that people are concerned about, to help answer those questions and fulfill those questions. That's really what I want to do. And then also, if I see things that are not being talked about enough, I want to bring those up as well. So basically, it's going to be trends and questions and big things that I notice from every single week. And that's going to be the main meat of the show. And then some waiver wire pickups as well along with that. Then Thursday's show is going to be a lot of miniature segments because I want to keep these episodes around 20 to 25 minutes. That's the goal, because I want to get you some fantasy football advice in not crazy amount of time, and then get you out so you can do your thing, live your life, and set your fantasy football lineups and get your fantasy football dreams come true. Now, looking at Thursday, we're going to do injury updates, very brief, quick injury updates to let you know who's questionable, who's out, who's on IR, who's healthy this week. Get through that. Then we're going to talk about my Hutch's clutch picks of the week, 4 players or a handful of players where it's like, I don't care what your lineup looks like. I don't care who you have in your lineup. force this player in. Like, this player is going to explode this week. I'm very confident in them. Then let's go to Q&A. I love some mailbag questions because not only am I answering some questions for the fans and listening to them and getting them involved, but it helps me as an analyst and helps people listening to the show to hear my thought processes behind who I start, who I sit, and helps you give understanding more on more players. If I just do start sit, it's like I'm only locked in on these players. But when there's questions, it's so many more players that I get to talk about, so many more offenses I get to talk about, so many more situations I get to talk about, and it becomes a much better conversation. So I really like that, and I want to make sure I get some mailbag questions in this year. And then lastly, we're gonna bring back the over-unders. I mean, I don't know if you listen to my podcast when it was different or called a different name, a year or two back, but I did this segment called the over-unders for a season where there's 3 fantasy football lines, either yards, touchdowns, whatever, and it's basically a prop line. I'm like, okay, they're projected for this much this week. Do you think they go over or under this line? And I bring on a guest, and we do 3 rounds, 3 guesses, and every week we review it, see how the person did. The only person that ever went all 3 right was Mr. Andy Bearhens of The Deep Shot, formerly of Yahoo. And now we're bringing him on week 1. That's the hope. We're still working out the official recording time, but hopefully we'll be able to bring him on week 1. So cannot wait for that. Can't wait for the football season. Can't wait to play fantasy football. If you have drafts this weekend, best of luck. And if you already done your draft, man, get ready for fantasy football time. We'll see you all next week on Tuesday with the first episode of really getting into football season.